We're so glad that you're here at Uplink. I'm Pastor Matt. This is my lovely wife, Heidi. We're so grateful that you're here and you're spending this time with us to learn more about the church, what we do, how we do it. This class is really meant to gather information, answer some questions that you may have being a newer person to our church, to this community. You're going to find out who we are. You're going to find out where we came from. We're going to talk a little bit about where we're going, all of it with the intent of you getting information that you need in order to be able to make a decision on whether Rev Church is where you want to be, whether you want to make it your home church or not, where you want to get involved or not. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to pass it to Heidi, and she's going to talk about the beginning and where we came from.
Yeah, so sometimes it's hard to even think about where we came from because it feels like it's been years and it's only been 4.5, but a little bit about our history. We actually have been together since we've been 16 years old. We are typical high school sweethearts, and that was fun and interesting. We have great stories. We were married at the age of 20. We had our first son, Matthew Jr., at the age of 22. We had Tanner at 24. We had great plans how we were going to, be parents young and send them out of the house young and be adults with no kids in the house fairly young. But we did end up adopting a third son while we were in Florida, and I'll get to that in a second. We made a lot of mistakes too in the early years of our marriage. We chased the almighty dollar and chased it, never caught it. Made a lot of mistakes, got into a lot of debt, and at one point we decided that we just needed to kind of start over. So we ended up moving to Florida, partly because some of his family members had moved to Florida before us, but it was perfect timing. We needed the escape. And in Florida, we actually met some friends named Larry and Deborah, who went out on a limb and invited us to church, knowing that we did not have a church background. I was raised Catholic, went to Catholic church until I was about, I want to say maybe 14 years old, but was never really very, very committed to that faith. And Matt really didn't go to church hardly at all, maybe a few times his whole childhood. He was technically raised Episcopalian, but I don't think that he would say that he was Episcopalian as a child. So anyway, back to Larry and Deborah. They invited us to church, and Matt was a little bit reluctant to go. He was very reluctant. He had he had to mow the lawn every weekend. And granted, the lawn had to be mowed anyway, but he had to mow the lawn the day that we wanted to go check out a church. But he ended up going, and the first church that we were invited to was not the right style for us. It was very traditional. I believe it was a Baptist church in Dade City, Florida. They were doing great things, but it was not what our family needed and what we were looking for. We didn't even know what we were looking for, but we were not looking for that church. And we ended up the next weekend going to visit New Walk Church in Zephyr Hills, Florida. And we definitely weren't looking for that either. I mean, it was a set up and tear down church in a YMCA, but everything about that church was exactly what we needed. They hit us right where we were, from parking to music style to atmosphere to first impressions. It was exactly what we needed at the time. And we pretty much both just jumped in 2 feet, very excited. We started serving right away, and we started reading our Bible and attending connection groups. It was life altering. Visiting that church was life altering. Meeting Larry and Deborah was life altering for us.
Yeah, and I want to share a little bit about the first church. I think Heidi's a little more gentle with it than I am, because when we got there and we got to that church, there was nobody who greeted us in the parking lot. There was just this older man at the door who had kind of a scowl on his face and almost looked like he was inspecting your clothes as you walked through. And to get your kids to Children's, you had to go up the stairs and down the hallway and around the corner. And if I can be all just completely transparent, there were times where, I fell asleep during the message. And so there was just a lot of things that didn't quite appeal to what we were looking for as a young family. Specifically, being myself unchurched, it wasn't filling the gap. And so when we got to New Walk, it was like mind blown, just amazing situation where it seemed like everything clicked and came together. I mean, they met us in the parking lot, just like we have parking people here. They were greeting us, and the atmosphere was amazing. There was a buzz to it. Getting our kids to kids was easy. It was clean and organized. Just the opportunities, everything was made easy. So it just worked really well. And so what we ended up doing, Heidi and I, we ended up signing up for serve teams that very week. The pastor stood on the stage. The church plant was only 6 weeks old at the time. And so we signed up for serve team that week. I signed up for set up and tear down, thinking that it would be the most behind the scene serve team to be able to be on. And I just kept doing everything that the pastor had said week after week after week. And he would say to do something, and we would do it. And if he said, try a different serve team to see, if it fits better for you, then we would try a different serve team. And so we were doing 2 or 3 serve teams at a time in order to be able to find out where we fit or where God wanted us. And on this journey, we ended up getting to this place to where both myself and Heidi, we got saved. Our 2 boys got saved. We were baptized. And then it became this place of just faithfully going to church every single week, serving like we had been. And then I just had this impression, this like real burden on my heart. A lot of people talk about it as being a call from the Lord. And it was just in this season, our pastor was looking for a youth guy, a guy to lead the youth ministry. There was a guy serving there at this point in time, but he was looking for somebody for a more permanent position. And so there was just kind of this stirring in my soul about, what this person was going to be doing and how that person would fit. And our pastor was bringing people in from all over the country to interview and do live interviews. And so I just talked to him one day and it said, hey, what are you looking for? How's this going to fit? It didn't quite make sense to me because I didn't like teenagers. I didn't like, they're teenagers. It's an obnoxious age group. And I didn't like the idea that my kids were going to become teenagers one day. And so I really didn't understand how all this was coming together. So I had talked with one of my accountability partners in Florida. His name was Mark, and he had shared with me that he really felt like after listening to what I was sharing with him that I was being called by the Lord. And so I went and sat down with my pastor and shared with him. And it was a funny exchange because it was on a youth night where the first guy was coming in to interview, and I literally got laughed at by my pastor, not laughing at me, but kind of laughing with me. Like he knew there was something that was going to happen. He knew something was going on in my life. He just didn't know what. And I had never been a part of a youth ministry, never been engaged in a youth ministry, never been to youth ministry. Like there was no draw in that way, shape, or form. But it was just something that was in me. I didn't quite understand it. So he told me I needed to start coming to youth. So I started coming to youth, started getting more and more engaged with the kids. One thing led to another, and I ended up leading youth. And so I did that for 3.5 years, which was amazing because anytime that you can preach God's word and love on people in khaki shorts and your hat on backwards, like that's where I fit. And it was really a great opportunity because in youth ministry, you have to take on and do all there is in ministry. You have to deal with evangelism, you have to deal with outreach, you're dealing with, reaching people, younger people as far as, going into the high schools and doing club stuff and we're dealing with discipleship. And so all these avenues, budgets, there's all this stuff that youth was, their parents. Yes, their parents. And so there was all these aspects of really like the big church in a smaller package. And so I feel like the Lord, of course, knew what he was doing in starting me there and training me up. And then my pastor came one afternoon and had shared with me that he wanted me to go and be assessed. It's a process where they kind of look at you and see what your abilities are and decide on whether you can plant a church or not.
Successfully plant
a church. And so I sat Heidi down and we went out for dinner, and I took her out for Chinese, which is her favorite. And I sat her down and I said, hey, how do you feel about being a pastor's wife? And I don't know if
I was duped into a date night.
I don't know if she was choking on a piece of lo mein or if she was upset by the question. But anyway, we had a long conversation, and in that moment, she had said she had agreed, that was something that she was going to do. But then that didn't pan out. The assessment fell through. The church couldn't afford to send me. And then about 6 months later, I had another friend of mine in ministry who invited me to a different assessment. And so we went, and both Heidi and I had to go. And it was a crazy process. And in going to that assessment, I was really torn between where I was supposed to be, because when this time came, when my pastor came to me and asked me about being a campus pastor, I was really torn between staying in Florida and being a campus pastor and coming back here to Connecticut and planting this church, because the times that we had come back here, it was very difficult for us to find a place where we could worship in an atmosphere like we were a part of at Newark. So I was kind of torn between one or the other. And I went to my accountability partner again, and I had shared with him the struggle that I was having. And he had shared with me, I said, we could go and start a campus, and it would be church on a platter pretty much. Our church would send, people who are giving, people who are serving, people who are, regular attenders. They would all come with us, and we'd start this church in a different location. And it would be an extension of the church we came from, which means you got all the support and the resources. Or we could go to Connecticut and plant a church from scratch and not know what's going to happen. And it was a very difficult decision. But my friend in Florida had said to me, which was one of the most profound things I think I've ever heard, or just amazing wisdom for my life. And he had said, when has anything that's been done significant for the Lord been easy? And so it was an eye-opening statement where I understood that the church on the platter was the easier route. And so I was, leaning more towards going to Connecticut and coming here and planting this church. However, when we left for the assessment, my prayer at the assessment, it was great. There was this little chapel that was there that kind of was built off of a hill. And I went in there. It was an amazing view. And it was in Seattle, Washington, actually, was where we got assessed. And I was in there, and I was just praying to the Lord, and it said, God, if you want me to go to Connecticut, you'll get me through this assessment. Because in my flesh, and Heidi knows from being my high school sweetheart, that the schooling part is not really my forte. And so I was just going to go and see what the assessment was about, learn everything about it, and however I did was whatever it was, and then I'd go back and retake it. That was my plan. But in the assessment, God really orchestrated it in such a way to where there were these different scenarios that had happened, and it was just these places in which I needed to just listen to what he was telling me, and it seemed outlandish at the time to where I should be shining as a leader, but he really was having me step back and be a little bit more subtle and humble in this process, because the other people, as they were trying to shine in their leadership, were actually showing where they had gaps in their leadership. The other couples who were being assessed. Sorry, yeah, there were 5 couples total who were there, and so I just listened, and it was funny because even some of the assessors were questioning some of the decisions that I was making in the process, but it all panned out, and Heidi and I ended up first in our class, which was an absolute green light in our lives that we were going to Connecticut to be able to plant this church. So in doing that, so we go to the assessment, we come home. After the assessment, there's this process of, we know where we're going, but how are we going to get there? And because to be able to do what we did as far as this process, it's called a large launch model. We didn't really start with nothing. I mean, we started with no people, but we didn't start with nothing. We had a grant that we had gotten, and you can't do a large launch model without a grant. It takes money. And so we had this decision that we had to make. So in the assessors who were at the assessment, there were 3 different, I'm going to call them entities that were represented. Saddleback was represented. the General Baptist was represented, which is who we were a part of when we were in Florida, and the Free Methodists were represented when we were there. And so in my flesh, I would have picked Saddleback first and been a purpose-driven model. Then I would have gone with General Baptist, which is what I knew because that's what I'm from, and then Free Methodist was the last on the list.
Mostly because we didn't know anything about.
We didn't know anything about them. And so we came home and we just started praying about what we wanted. And the prayer was not what we wanted, but what God wanted us to do. And so we're praying, and the prayer really was, God, we want you to open the door that you want open and shut the doors you want shut. And Saddleback fell off the map right in the beginning because we weren't planting in a large metropolitan area. We knew we wanted to come to Norwich. We knew southeastern Connecticut was where we wanted to be. And this is not considered large metropolitan area. So we had to, so they fell off the map. They wouldn't even look at us.
Meaning they wouldn't give us the grant money.
Right, they wouldn't give us the grant money. And then from there, the General Baptists were coming after me a little bit. They were seeking, talking, trying to meet up. It wasn't really panning out. Every time they came to see me, something came up. Every time they wanted me to come see them, something came up. And it was all this kind of back and forth struggle that happened. So what we ended up doing is the Free Methodists came down from Baltimore, which is where their headquarters was, and met me in Orlando. And then about 3 weeks later, another gentleman came down and met me. And about a month after that, they flew me from Florida to Baltimore to be able to talk about the budget and our plan and what our vision looked like and all that kind of stuff. I had to sit in front of the Board of Administration and the Ministerial and Educational Board. And so they ended up approving my credentials being transferred from the GB, the General Baptist, to the Free Methodist. And they offered me a package as far as, being a part of the denomination and planting this church. And so they granted us that money. And that's how we ended up being here and getting to this place. And so,
don't you think part of the reason why the Free Methodists pursued was because their denomination needed something new, something more alive?
Yes.
They needed a change.
Yes. Well, the denomination as a whole, I don't want to get boring on anybody, but the denomination as a whole is rather old. And that there's nothing against old. I'm not saying anything about old, but it was very one-sided. It was very heavy on one side. And so they really have been looking at church planting models and different ways of doing things and how they can kind of balance out the scale a little bit. And so that was a very heavy weight for them by bringing myself and Heidi into the picture as far as planting this church, because it was coming from an angle in which they were pursuing, and so we kind of filled a gap for them. So yes, that is how that went down. And so what ended up happening is February 2nd of 2012, I arrived here in Connecticut. I left Heidi and the boys at home. They finished up school. Heidi was a school teacher. Both Matthew and Tanner were in school. Our younger son, Sean, we were in the process of adopting him, and we had got him through foster care. We were doing foster care while we were in Florida, and so he ended up coming and staying with us. And in the meantime, the whole process of the parents, rights got terminated, and then this little boy needs a place to live, and so we adopted him. Which really screwed up our plan from before, which was having kids early and getting them out early, because there's a significant difference in age between our youngest biological
We're not
and
done parenting
Sean.
for a while.
So it's going to be a fun little ride, but we're excited about that. So Matthew, Tanner, Heidi, and Sean stayed in Florida. Heidi had to finish her school year teaching. The boys ended up having to finish their school year as well. When they got done in June, they moved up to Connecticut, and we had gotten an apartment. And in the meantime of them being in Florida, me being in Connecticut, I start building what was called a launch team, and gathering people together, trying to share a vision that people had a very hard time wrapping their heads around because they couldn't see where I was coming from. And so I'm trying to cast this thing out there.
We were bringing a very southern, contemporary style church to a very traditional New England. So we were faced with a lot of opposition.
Yeah, it was, and it really, I think, was just a fear of change. A fear of change. And that's one of the things that we've realized even here up until this point in our tenure with this church is that the biggest barrier for a lot of people is the change. You know, going from what they've always known to something different. And it's okay. And what we found is over, 3, 4, 5 visits, we watch people transform and let go of some of that fear and realize that we are a God-fearing, Bible-believing, Spirit-filled church, and we're not bashful of that. We don't shy away from it. It just looks different. It looks different. It may sound different, but at the end of the day, God is at the center of everything that we're doing. And so I'm building this team, and we had 3 different groups of people. We had people who were excited and enthusiastic about starting. We had people who were kind of like on the fence, and then we had people who were like, yeah, you just let me know when you're going to have your first service. And so Heidi and the boys move up in June. That was really when the gear started, just running quick. We were, it's when the rubber hit the road.
We started holding some Bible studies in the house.
We did. We were doing some Bible studies and trying to gather some of these people together to create some momentum. We had about 50 people total when we had launched in those 3 groups, very excited, on the fence, and not so excited. And so we ended up in this process. We faced a lot of opposition from the city. We tried to get into some of the local schools, and the schools wouldn't have us. We tried getting into different buildings and other facilities that are sitting vacant, but weren't allowed because of zoning issues. And there was just a lot of junk that we had to face, including when we finally did get approved to use Norwich Tech High School. They only gave us 8 weeks to use the school. And they told us that 8 weeks before we launched. And so we only had 16 weeks to find a new home, or we were going to be a homeless church. So we launched on September 29th of 2012. We had 209 people in attendance. 6 people gave their lives to Christ that weekend. And then it was like we had unleashed the beast. It was just crazy because what you're taught in church planting is that you grow backwards for 6 weeks because all the tire kickers, don't stay around. Just kind of checking out, see what it is. And we only went backwards for 4 weeks. And but the cool thing was, and the difficult piece that happened at that time was when we launched on September 29th, that next Monday was when we got a building permit to be able to build out a building that we had found. And
to rent.
It was, we were leasing it. And so it was in Basra, and it was part of Goran's furniture warehouse over there. And he had a 10,000 square foot piece that was open square footage. And so Basra was gracious enough to do some zoning adjustments for us, and which we didn't get anywhere else. And then in that Monday, when we got the building permit, we were able to go into that space, start building. We put up a wall to separate the sanctuary. We put up some walls to separate children's rooms, and that created a foyer, and we just did church.
It was like Monday through Friday, we were at the place that we were going to move to, remodeling it, which, how gracious was it that our landlord let us remodel a building that we hadn't even really signed a lease on. And then on the weekends, we were doing setup and tear down at our first facility. It was very chaotic, and
yes, we were pretty much
was
planting a church and building a church all at the same time.
Yeah.
And so it was very chaotic, but we got through it. And on week 5, I was able to stand in front of the church at the high school and say, "Don't come back here next week," which is totally against the grain because they tell you you want to create consistency. And
statistically, the church should have died.
Right. That was inconsistent, but it didn't. We actually grew. And so that following week, when we moved into the new building, it was amazing. We didn't lose anybody.
No.
It was absolutely amazing.
We grew.
We did because we only went backwards for 4 weeks. After week 4, we have never gone backwards in the history of our church. And so it was absolutely amazing. And so we were in that building for about 2.5 years. Mm-hmm. It was about 2.5 years. But in that process, the owners of that facility told us that they were going to put the property up for sale, and we didn't want to be homeless again. So, so we were kind of in this place of what we were going to do. So we started looking at different properties, searching around, doing some different things. We were spending some money on, perk tests and stuff like that to find out if places would accommodate the kind of facility that we would need. And it just seemed like we were forcing it. Nothing was popping. We looked at different buildings that were already existing. We prayed a lot. And then I just decided that we were going to stop. I said, we can't push anymore. I felt like we were forcing it. And so then a church member came to me and said, hey, I don't know if you know this, but the Boy Scout camp that's up around the corner is going to be putting their property up for auction. And so we investigated that, came and looked at it. The town was very excited about us acquiring it because there were some people who wanted to put housing developments here and all that kind of stuff, and the town didn't want to have to do that. And so there was a lot of hoopla going on in the town, and so we had the town support, which was great because of the relationship we'd already built. And so what ended up happening is it went up for auction. It was a closed auction, and so you had to put in your best bid. And when we put in our best bid, we went and sent it with a cover letter. And so as we're sending that in, we had all our ducks in a row. We had gone through the denomination and found out that we were going to be able to acquire the loan that we needed, and all this kind of stuff, all the legwork, the preliminary stuff that we needed to do. And so we ended up winning the bid. So we won the bid based on the cover letter that stated the use and the purpose of the property. And so with that, then I had really done one of the most scary things I've ever had to do in my life, which was sign my name to a 7-figure document, which was a little bit of a stretch for me in my life. And so, but once we did that, we came here and we started to do the remodel. And for those of you who have been here, you know that the sanctuary that you sat in, that was a dining room for the Boy Scouts. The foyer in which you were in was the kitchen. And the children's building, we built as an addition to this existing structure. And so we were able to remodel the house type structure that's up there as you come in and made that our offices. So we really stretched the dollar as far as we could. And it was a amazing scenario, how it all came together. And the cool part too, before I get into it, I want Heidi to share with you this God-sized vision that he's given us for the property. But it was really amazing that we didn't have to go to the church in that season because of the faithful givers who attend here. They, the financial institution that we went through with the denomination, we were able to, because of what we were already paying for rent at our other facility, coming here and owning this property was not that much of a difference in price. And so we were approved for that loan based on our giving, which was amazing, where you don't have to go to a young church and say, hey, we need to raise this money to do this thing. And so it was absolutely God-sized that we were able to purchase the property, do the remodel, and not skip a beat. We didn't have to go to the church and say, hey, this is what we've got to do, or raise money or anything like that. It was already there, and that was truly a testimony to the people who were already here and faithfully following through. So just share.
Well,
about
that
what's
didn't.
going to happen here.
The transition from the rental property down the road to our own piece of property, only 4 minutes away, was still a transition, because people saw that we had won the auction for this property, and they thought, wow, you must be doing really great. You must have all this money. You now own, 327 acres. But what they needed to realize was we purchased property that was mostly woods. So yes, we were moving from something that we rented to something we owned, but it wasn't perfect. We needed to put a lot of work into it, which is why we had to build the kids' addition. And when we transitioned from the rental property here, it was what Matt calls a lateral move. Space-wise, square footage-wise, we went from, how much?
About 10,000 square feet.
So let's just say from 10,000 to 10,000. We didn't gain anything other than a lot of woods and a lot of trees, which is great for the future. But for the time being, it was lateral. After we moved here and the renovation was done and we started to settle in, the vision that God gave Pastor Matt, my husband, I don't really call him Pastor Matt when we're alone, just so you know. I'm only calling him Pastor Matt for you guys. Matt. The vision that God gave Matt was kind of mind-blowing, and it really was difficult for some people to grasp at first, because, you know, when you hear Revelation Church, you think church, weekends, church services, maybe a youth service midweek. You don't think of other things. But if God entrusted us with 327 acres, it can't just be for a church that only meets on the weekends. That's not being a good steward of everything that he's given to us. So over the course of, you know, a few months together, we really realized that if we have this amount of acreage, we need to use as much of it as we can for the kingdom. So part of the property is going to be, you know, the church, the main church building. Clearly, the building that you're sitting in right now is not large enough to accommodate where we're going in the future. I mean, statistics say that 65% of the people in your town do not come to a church. Kingdom-wise, that's not good. We want everybody to be able to go to church. So we need to build a bigger building. We need larger classrooms. We need a larger sanctuary. We really need more parking.
More bathrooms. We need more bathrooms.
More bathrooms. Yeah. God is growing Revelation Church, so therefore we have to do what we can do to make more seats for the unchurched. The easy thing to do would be to say, well, God's blessed us so far. We got 700 people coming on a weekend. Let's just stop, because it's already a lot of work. But the people who aren't coming to church are worth more than that. So that's what we need to do. So we are currently in a what if vision campaign, so that we can raise money for a larger facility. So that's phase one. Phase one of the property is the church, and we need to build a larger church. This building will become the youth building. So as the new church that's built up on the hill, I'm saying up on the hill because that's where I'm pointing to right now outside, but the new church will be built up on the hill where you see all the trees were cut down. The building that you're in right now will become the youth center, the youth building. We don't really have a name for it, but the youth, the teenagers, the 6th through 12th graders will house this facility, and that will be terrific for them. Off to the side, I'm pointing this way because that's where the woods are right now, but off to the side, we're going to have a youth camp. Think of everything that you think of, or envision everything that you can think of when you think of a youth camp. Cabins, a dining hall, the lake to swim in, an activity center, maybe, I think of vending machines. I just think of fun. A place where churches in, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New York can drive their youth group to. They would have to reserve time, but they can drive their youth group to, so that their teenagers can experience youth camp away from the push and the pull of the world. So it won't be just for our church's youth ministry. It will be for other churches' youth ministries that don't have a place to go to that isn't, more than 3 hours away. So we feel that providing other churches' youth ministries a place where they can go to camp is not only a blessing to us and to this property, but to those churches. So that's phase 2. Phase 3 is going to be an adult retreat center on the back side of the property, on the other side of the lake. God has really shown us that adults need a quiet place away where they can either, I'm thinking adults in ministry. I'm thinking about pastors and pastors' wives who maybe their salary makes it so that they can't afford a vacation. A place where they can come and take time away from the stressors of their responsibilities of running a church, and they can focus on their marriage. Maybe they can even bring their children. Maybe it's something for their whole entire family. a place where married couples who need to invest time back into their marriage, need to be restored and refueled, can go to. So we've got phase 3 of the vision for Revelation Church property as an adult retreat center. Did I miss anything?
No,
The church,
no, that was good.
the teens, the adults.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah.
And these phases obviously are, I mean, it's all the Lord, right? As far as the phases are concerned. And one other piece before, because I'm gonna share about our beliefs and this code that we have. But before I get into that, I also want to share about another piece as far as the future is concerned, right? Because these are all futuristic phases, right? We're waiting on building the new building. I mean, God is just blowing this place up. I mean, we're about to add a 4th service. Who knows what that's going to, lead to? And then you've got, our parking scenario is horrible. If you're not here 15 minutes before service, you're going to end up parking in, the back corner of the property. So there's a lot of things that are coming, but there's also another aspect that we haven't talked about yet as far as the future is concerned, and that's church planting. Like, we are going to plant churches. They're either going to be independent churches that we send off to do their thing, or they're going to be video venues in which we have it's a campus where we just send people to serve. We have a campus pastor there to love on people and shepherd people, and the content comes in via video. There's all kinds of options, but we're going to plant churches because
it's important to raise up leaders.
Absolutely, it's important to raise up leaders. It's important to plant churches. I mean, there's not enough churches. There's more churches dying today than there are starting, and so there's this decline in the church, and it's depressing when you really think about it. So that's something that we're going to do. We're going to plant churches, and we're going to move people along. One of the things that you'll realize here is we're very intentional about raising up leaders, about giving people responsibility of things that we don't want to have to do anymore. And all that's going to do is just deepen our reach. It's going to allow us to go to places that we didn't think we'd be able to go. And it's a responsibility of ours as raising disciples. And so, because here, another thing you're going to understand here at Revelation Church is that we're not just hearers of the word, we're doers of the word. And so if you're looking to find a place to come where you can just sit and listen, this may not be the right fit for you, because we are constantly pressing into each other about how we need to be going and doing what God has called us to do. And so now I want to share with you about our beliefs and what that looks like as far as our church is concerned. And the first belief, and you can find these on our website at myrevelationchurch.com, but our first belief is we believe in one God who is eternal, all-powerful, and absolutely holy, who has revealed himself to man as existing in 3 distinguishable expressions of his essential being: the Father, Jesus Christ the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And there's some scriptures there that you can look up and refer to. We believe that the Bible, composed of the Old and New Testaments, is God's eternal, inspired, infallible word in its entirety, and is the supreme standard and final authority for all conduct, faith, and doctrine. We believe Christ died for our sins, was buried and rose again the 3rd day, and personally appeared to his disciples. We believe in the salvation of sinners by grace through repentance and faith in the perfect and sufficient work of the cross of Calvary, by which we obtain remission of sins. We believe in the Spirit-filled life, a life of separation from the world and perfecting of holiness in the fear of God as an expression of Christian faith. We believe in eternal life for believers, a literal heaven where we will live and reign with Christ, and eternal punishment for unbelievers, a literal hell for those who reject Christ. We believe the church is a local community of believers unified through faith in Christ. The church works together in love and unity, intent on ultimate purpose of glorifying Christ. And so here at Revelation Church, we have a code as well. And the first piece of this code, or these core values that we really base our decision making on and we use as a a driver for our daily operations is this. The first one is we are passionate. It says we will lovingly and fervently pursue those far from God and develop them into a generation that will impact the kingdom. Passionate, meaning that we're just excited about what's happening, that we are going to, like it says, fervently pursue. We're just going to go after. That's why I said earlier that if you're really wanting to be here and just be a hearer of the word but not a doer of the word, this might not quite be the right fit. The second one is this: we are unstoppable. It says we will not stop until every person in our community has heard the truth about Jesus. That means that we're going to be talking about reaching people. We're going to be talking about inviting people. We're going to be talking about the church growing. We're going to be talking about reaching people who are far from God. That's why the vision is what the vision is. So people far from God experience radical transformation through Christ. We are unstoppable. The next one is we are privileged. We recognize we don't have to serve. We get to serve. We will remain grateful and positive and never take our position for granted. This is a privilege. You'll hear that in partnership class, which you'll hear a little bit about here in a minute. But it's a privilege to do what we do. It's a privilege to be a part of the local church. It's a privilege to be able to serve the King of Kings. And so that's the stance in which we take. We are privileged. The next piece is we are purposeful. It says we will not waste time or be distracted from our vision. Everything we do is done with intentionality to expand the kingdom, which means there may be some things that if you have a past church history that you may have done in other churches that we don't do here, and that's because we might think that some of those things are fluff, like they're taking away from the focus. They're turning our focus inward instead of outward, and so we're very purposeful in that. One of the things that we don't do here is we won't do like weekly potlucks. Like we're not going to do a Wednesday night spaghetti dinner because only church people come to Wednesday night spaghetti dinners. The next thing is this: we are a generation of honor. We will seek to honor those above us, beside us, and under us due to the calling and God's best in them. This is meaning that we don't know who the next Billy Graham is. We don't know who the next Mother Teresa is, and we have got to honor those above us, beside us, and below us, because we want to make sure that we're going to be a generation of honor, that we're honoring all areas, up, out, and down. The next one is we will inspire. We will speak life and hope into those who have lost their sense of purpose so that they may discover the God potential within themselves. We have seen this over and over and over again. People who have come to this church who are just purposeless, and they really have no direction. And part of what we're doing is we want to infuse them and inspire them in their lives to be able to redirect them and get them back on track for the purpose in which they were created and called. The last one is we are revelation. It says we will passionately defend the vision of our pastor so that our heart's cry becomes so people far from God experience radical transformation through Christ. This one right here is where some people will struggle because I've been told before in the past that sounds kind of cultish. I'm not worried about that because it's really not. What it's saying is that the vision that God has downloaded into me, that we as a church are going to come and rally around that we're going to help create a culture. We're going to help infuse this vision into the community. We're going to help infuse it into our families. We're going to help, be a part of this mission that God has called us to. So it's important that when we're here and when we're a part of Revelation Church, that we understand what we're doing, how we're doing it, why we're doing it, and you can get more information about that in the partnership class that's going to come up, which I'm going to pass off to Heidi.
But before we talk about partnership real quick, I just want to talk about a buffet line. Everybody loves a buffet. He knows that I love Chinese buffet. At a buffet line, you go there hungry. You know that the people in the back in the kitchen have prepared the food for you. They bring it out, big hot pans of food. You take your plate and you load your plate up and you walk yourself back to your seat and you sit and eat. If you're hungry, you have to initiate the putting of the food onto your plate to eat. We call Revelation Church a spiritual buffet. He and I, the leadership team, the high capacity volunteers, actually really all of the volunteers, we are providing for the church body the hot food in large quantities. We want you to initiate the taking of your plate and loading it up and consuming it. We offer connection groups so that you can grow deeper. Life is very, very difficult, and what you get in an hour and 10 minutes on the weekend is not enough to keep you going the whole rest of the week. It just isn't. Connection groups are your midweek way of refueling. We offer serve teams. We provide many, many, many opportunities for people to serve where their gifts are. Sometimes people say they have no gifts. We will create a serve team just for you. We want you to serve because Jesus served. We have growth tracks. We've had people come through the doors of the church that say that they feel being led to be a pastor. Pastor Matt will take that person under his wing and will lead him through that step. So think about Revelation Church as being the Chinese buffet down the road. Take the initiative and fill up your own plate, because we do not have the time to put the fork in your mouth. You have to be able to do that on your own. And lastly, partnership. We want you to join us and be part of the Revelation Church family. Your next step after this Uplink class would be to go home and really pray. Is Revelation Church going to be my home? Is this where I want to do life? Is this where I want to raise my children? Is this where I want to fellowship with other believers? We invite you to come alongside of us so that you can experience the amazing things that God is doing in and through this church and in and through the people of this church, and become a church partner. And at the end of this class, your group facilitator is going to tell you when the next partnership class is. It should only be in a few weeks. You shouldn't have to wait very long. You'll be able to get to meet Pastor Matt live, hear directly from him about the partnership process, ask him any questions that you may feel led to ask. And the other thing is your group facilitator is going to hand you some cards on where some serve teams are. It is not too early to start to serve the church before you become a partner of the church.
Yeah, I started serving in week 1, like we said earlier, when we started going to New Walk. So,
as an unbeliever.
As an unbeliever. And so there's really no excuses. And that sounds weird. That sounds harsh. Should I have not put that in there? So
there's
you can just cut that out if
Don't
you want to.
Don't cut it out. There's no excuses.
But anyway, no, there's really not a reason not to. And so there's so many opportunities. We have so many areas in which we can do that, and we are firm believers that we are called to serve, and so that's just a piece that we offer. But I just want to thank you. We both want to thank you for the opportunity to be able to sit here and share with you, and we hope that it was okay. We hope you didn't fall asleep, and that this was informational for you, that you're able to glean from this, and like Heidi said, go and pray about it and decide whether this church is the church that is going to be your church, because that's a piece that we want you to understand. We don't want you to be in a place where you don't think you belong or you fit, and if this isn't your fit, it's okay. Like, we love you. We think highly of you. We want you to go and find the place where you fit. And maybe you've got a question and you're like, this doesn't fit for me, but where can I go? We have a lot of relationships with other churches in the community where we can get you plugged into a place that is more fitting for what you're looking for. But if this is where you're going to be, and this is where you're going to stay, and it is where you're going to call home, then you're going to hear a lot about us saying, where are you going? How can we help you get there? What is the Lord calling? How's he pressing you? What is he telling you as you're learning more about him and this relationship that you have with him? And so this is just a piece, right? Uplink is information for you to be able to make that decision about whether you're going to stay or not. If you're going to stay, you really want to come to partnership class, and you really want to find out more information about that and see what it means to be a partner of the local church. And then once you're a partner, the floodgates are going to open, and there's so many opportunities that are out there, especially in a growing, thriving, healthy church. So I look forward to what God has for you and us as a whole. When you come to partnership class, I look forward to meeting you in person. If you've got questions, you'll want to bring them there, and because I give an opportunity for you to be able to answer, where I answer your questions there. So, but if you have questions and you're not looking to go to partnership class, you can just email me at matt@myrevelationchurch.com, and I'll be able to get to those as well. So whatever the case might be, but I look forward to meeting you, and thanks so much for spending this time with us.
Hi, my name is Dave, and this is my lovely wife Caroline. We are volunteers here at Revelation Church. I want to thank you guys for watching this video. If during this video you've decided to call Revelation Church home, there's a couple ways to get started. First, sign up for partnership class, then connection groups, and then sign up for a serve team. I want to thank you guys again, and I'll see you this weekend.